There comes a point in life when you realize the pain that you've been carrying didn't just come from what happened to you. Sometimes it came from the story you started telling yourself afterwards. The story that said, you missed your chance. You should be further along by now. Your best years are behind you. Starting over at your age is embarrassing. And if you're not careful, you'll start living from that script instead of living from truth. So today I want to talk about what it means to rewrite the script for your life. Not just after divorce, not just after disappointment, not just after loss, but after any moment that tried to convince you your story was over. Stick with me. Hey, welcome back to Ways of Change. I'm Vanessa, and this is the space where I document my overseas job search, my reinvention journey, and what it looks like to build a life rooted in peace, purpose, and courage. And since it's Sunday, there are no applications submitted today and no engagement hour. Today was slower, more reflective, more inward. Sometimes the biggest work you do isn't sending the email, submitting the application, or making the call. Sometimes the biggest work is changing the way you see yourself. And that kind of work changes everything. So let's talk about the script. The one you were handed, the one you inherited, the one pain tried to write for you, and the one you now have every right to revise. I think a lot of us have spent years, decades even, living inside stories we didn't write. Stories handed to us by family, by culture, by expectations, by heartbreak, by rejection, by seasons that left us wounded and wondering. And if you've lived long enough, you know how easy it is for pain to start narrating your future. Maybe it wasn't a divorce for everybody. Maybe it was betrayal. Maybe it was becoming a single mother. Maybe it was serving time in prison. Maybe it was a career setback. Maybe it was being overlooked or underestimated. Maybe it was giving your all to people, places, and systems that never really knew your value. Whatever it was, it left a mark. And sometimes that mark becomes a message. Not because it's true, but because it hurt deeply enough to feel true. So when you start thinking, maybe I'm too late, maybe I'm not enough, maybe I missed my window, maybe this is all life has for me. And those thoughts don't always come in loud ways. Sometimes they whisper. They show up when you talk yourself out of trying, when you downplay your gifts, when you settle for crumbs, when you laugh off your dreams before anyone else can. That's how old scripts survive. They don't always scream. Sometimes they sound practical. Sometimes they sound mature. Sometimes they sound responsible even. But underneath it all, it's still the same lie. Don't hope too hard. Don't ask for too much. Don't believe for more. Just survive. And I want to say this with my whole chest. A painful chapter can be real without it becoming your identity. That's dangerous. Not just the chapter itself, but when the chapter becomes the narrator. When what happened to you starts telling you who you are. And I think that's why this season of my life has been teaching me so much. Because even now, in real time, I can see how easy it would be to let uncertainty write the wrong story. Y'all know I've been documenting my overseas job search, the applications, the waiting, the silence, the pivots, the faith, the frustration, all of it. And today being Sunday, there were no applications submitted and no engagement hour, but that doesn't mean nothing meaningful happened today. Reflection is still work. Rest is still work. Getting honest with yourself is still work. And one thing this journey has shown me is how easy it would be to let this process write the wrong story. I could let the silence write the story. I could let the waiting write the story. I could let these slim pickings write the story. I could let the delay and the closed doors write the story. I could decide that because something has taken longer than I wanted, it must not be for me. I could decide that because there isn't visible movement, there isn't meaning behind what I'm doing. I could decide that because I don't have confirmation yet, I should lower my expectations. But that would be the old script, my friend. And I've lived enough life to know this. Silence doesn't always mean no. Delay doesn't always mean denial. A pause is not proof that God has forgotten you. And uncertainty does not cancel calling. Sometimes you're in the middle of the rewrite. Sometimes the pages look blank because the ink hasn't dried yet. Sometimes nothing looks dramatic on the outside, but heaven is still moving. And sometimes there is no visible fruit yet, but the roots are still growing. And I think that's where the turning point begins. The moment you realize you may not have written every chapter that happened to you, but you do get to decide what the story means from here. That's power. That's healing. That's maturity. That's agency. There comes a time when you realize you're not obligated to keep rehearsing the version of yourself that was built in survival mode. You can honor her without staying her. You can thank the woman who got you through the storm without forcing her to lead you forever. You can appreciate the part of you that learned to endure, that learned to stretch a dollar, that learned to keep showing up, that learned to function while still hurting. But that doesn't mean you have to live there forever. There's more to you than survival. There's more to you than your hardest chapter. There's more to you than what hurt you. And I think that transformation begins right there. Not always in some dramatic breakthrough. Sometimes it begins quietly. Sometimes it starts when you get tired of speaking about yourself like your life is already decided. Sometimes it starts when you hear yourself minimizing your own possibilities one too many times. Sometimes it starts when you realize the way you've been talking to yourself is not how you would speak to anyone you love. And something inside you says, no, this cannot be the final version of me. That is the turning point. That is the moment you start reclaiming authorship of your own life. And that's what I want somebody to hear today. You still have the pen. I know life tried to snatch it. I know disappointment tried to grab it. I know fear tried to write the next paragraph for you. But you still have the pen. And as long as you still have the pen, there's still possibility. If this is resonating with you, go ahead and subscribe to this channel. And in the comments, I want you to tell me this. What is one old script you're refusing to keep reading from? Name it. Because once you name a thing, you stop letting it hide in silence. Now, once you start identifying the old script, the next step is just as important. You have to reconnect with the person underneath the pain. A lot of us have spent years, and like I said, decades even, being what everyone else needed. Strong, dependable, capable, nurturing, available, responsible. And there's beauty in that. Absolutely. But somewhere along the way, you lost touch with yourself. Not because you failed, but because you've been busy carrying everyone else. So one day you wake up and you realize you know what everyone else likes. Their favorite food, favorite shows, favorite pajamas even. You know what everyone else needs. You know what everyone else expects. But you haven't stopped to ask, what do I want? What do I enjoy? What feels like peace to me? What kind of life do I actually want to live? That rediscovery work is sacred. And no, it doesn't always happen through some dramatic reinvention montage. Sometimes it starts small. It starts with choosing what you want for dinner. It starts with taking the scenic route, buying yourself flowers, getting that puppy you've always wanted, listening to music you love, sitting in silence long enough to hear your own preferences again. It starts by asking yourself what you miss. As a recreation therapist, one of the questions I've asked my clients, what do you miss? What made you feel alive before life got so heavy? And I think people underestimate how healing simple self-return can be. Not flashy, not performative, just honest. And yes, sometimes this process is raw, straight with no chaser. Because whenever you reconnect with yourself, you also notice where you abandon yourself. And that can hurt. It does hurt. But it's also powerful because once you see it, you could change it. And once you start reconnecting with yourself, you can't just stop at inspiration. You have to build a life that actually supports the new version of you. Because it's one thing to say I'm becoming a new version of myself. It's another thing to create structures that actually support her. That means routines, boundaries, habits, the decisions, standards, environments. It may mean creating new morning rituals, getting your finances in order, learning something new, protecting your Sundays, saying no without a speech attached to it. It may mean deciding that your peace is part of your budget, your peace is part of your calendar, your peace is part of your standards. Your peace is not extra. It's infrastructure. And I think one of the greatest acts of self-respect is to build a life that doesn't constantly require your own betrayal. Let me say that again for the people in the back. One of the greatest acts of self-respect is to build a life that doesn't constantly require your own betrayal. A life where you don't always override your spirit. A life where you don't constantly silence your needs. A life where you don't keep saying yes to things that leave you resentful and depleted. Okay? That's part of the rewrite too. Because if the old script was rooted in survival, the new script has to include support. It has to include rest, order, boundaries, honesty, peace. And sometimes people don't like the new you because the new you is no longer convenient. But that doesn't mean the new you is wrong. It may just mean you're finally becoming clear on who you are. And then comes one of the most healing parts of all. You stop just surviving what happened and you start reframing it. One of the most healing things we could do is reframe what happened to us. Not deny, not minimize, not pretend it didn't hurt, but reframe it. Because the same event can carry one meaning in one season and a completely different meaning in another. At one point in your life, you may have seen a closed door as rejection. Later, you may see it as protection. I know I've seen that plenty of times. At one point, you may have seen heartbreak as proof you were unworthy. Later, Y'all hear that motorcycle? Later, you may see it as the thing that pushed you back to yourself. At one point, you may have seen starting over as humiliation. Later, you may see it as liberation. That's what reframing does. It doesn't erase the pain. It redeems the meaning. And I think that's one of the gifts of time, perspective. You live long enough to look back and realize that thing didn't just break me. It changed me. It matured me. It clarified me. It redirected me. It taught me what matters. Not pleasant, but not pointless. And maybe that's the word for somebody today. It wasn't pointless. The delay wasn't pointless. The heartbreak wasn't pointless. The lonely season wasn't pointless. The rebuilding wasn't pointless. The waiting wasn't pointless. You may not understand it fully right now, but that doesn't mean it's pointless. Now, I really want to speak to the woman in midlife for a moment. The woman who feels behind. The woman quietly grieving time. The woman who thought by now she would be settled, secure, partnered, clear, established, somewhere else entirely. The woman who still gets up, still handles business, still smiles, still carries it well, but deep down wonders whether her biggest moments are already behind her. I want to tell you plainly, you are not too late. You are not disqualified by age. You are not less powerful because you had to start over. You are not foolish for still wanting more. You are not silly for still having dreams. Midlife, my friend, is not a dead end. Midlife can be a doorway. Midlife can be the season where you stop asking the world who you're allowed to be. Midlife can be the season where you stop dimming your voice. And I say that as somebody living in it in real time. I'm still processing too, still building, still trusting, still becoming, still applying faith to uncertainty. And maybe that's why this message matters so much to me. Because rewriting your life is not something you do once. It's something you keep choosing again and again and again. The scripture I want to anchor today's episode in is Isaiah 43. Remember ye not the former things, neither consider the things of old. Behold, I will do a new thing. Now it shall spring forth. Shall ye not know it? That scripture doesn't say your former things never happened. It doesn't say your old story didn't hurt. It doesn't say pretend none of it mattered. But it does say do not stay there. Don't keep rehearsing the old thing so much that you miss the new thing. Don't become so attached to the familiar pain that you overlook fresh possibilities. And I think for so many of us, that's the invitation. Can you believe in a new thing before it fully arrives? I can. Can you make room for a new thing while the old story is still trying to call your name? I can. That's faith. That's surrender. That's maturity. And that's where peace begins. So today, with no application submitted and no engagement hour completed, I still believe this day mattered. Because this day became a mirror, a checkpoint, a reminder, a chance to tell the truth. And the truth is this: I'm not living from the old script anymore. I may still remember it. I may still feel old fears trying to rise up. I may still hear old narratives knocking sometimes. But I don't belong to that script anymore. And I want that for you too. I want you to get to a place where the old story may visit, but it no longer gets to move in. It doesn't get to decorate the place. It doesn't get to choose the music. It doesn't get to narrate your future. Because you have a new script now. A script rooted in truth, peace, courage, self-respect, and faith. And no, it may not happen overnight. But every time you challenge a lie, you rewrite. Every time you choose yourself in a healthy way, you rewrite it. Every time you stop calling yourself too late, you rewrite it. Every time you get up again, you rewrite it. And every time you refuse to make an idol out of disappointment, you rewrite it. And those little rewrites, they become your new script. If this episode spoke to you, make sure you subscribe to the channel. And in the comments, tell me, what old scripts are you done reading from? And if this message made you think of someone else who is rebuilding, starting over, or trying to find themselves again, share this episode with them. Because people need reminders that their story is not over. Hey friend, I'm Vanessa and this is Waves of Change. Thank you so much for joining me today. I appreciate you. I'll see you tomorrow for day 73. Bye now.